Will Pam Bondi resign? Trump issues an ultimatum to Putin. And Elmo's anti-Semitic rant, brought to you by the letter X. That and more on this week's America Uncovered headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Hey, remember last week when I talked about how many MAGA supporters felt angry and betrayed that the DOJ and FBI concluded that there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list and that he killed himself? And how Trump basically just told everyone to get over it.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, having had a week to reflect, everyone realized that you can always trust the government, and it was time to stop dwelling on the past and move on to, I'm just kidding, the MAGA rebellion over the Epstein case continues. And that's not all. Democrats have demanded full disclosure from Trump. But in the House Rules Committee, all but one Republican, minus one that was absent, voted against an amendment that, if passed, would have forced Congress to vote on releasing the Epstein files. They voted against voting. That's the most democratic, undemocratic thing I've ever heard. These Republicans' explanation for their vote is that the Epstein files contain content featuring minors being sexually abused, and the amendment was attached to a bill they likely would have voted against anyway, which makes enough sense. But it doesn't make anyone, many Republicans included, feel any better about the fact that the DOJ's source for concluding Epstein didn't blackmail anyone is trust me, bro. Meanwhile, in the MAGA sphere, which sounds like the most boring Vegas show imaginable, many are upset with Trump's reaction and are calling for Attorney General Pam Bondi to resign. And by many, I mean a petition demanding Bondi resign has received literally thousands of signatures. Meanwhile, Tucker Carlson called some of Bondi's claims about the Epstein files ludicrous, which I find offensive, mainly to rapper/actor Ludacris, who I'm sure also wants Bondi to move the get out of the way. And Megyn Kelly, who I just learned isn't a clone of Bondi, thinks the Attorney General may even be intentionally trying to make the Trump administration look bad.
So she's either lazy and incompetent, or she willingly humiliated some of the president's most loyal supporters. Neither one of those is good, and that's why I'm sorry, but I'm going to predict her days are numbered.
There are also reports people within the FBI are upset about how Bondi has handled the whole thing. According to Axios, FBI Director Dan Bongino clashed with Bondi over the handling of the Epstein files. Reports say Bongino threatened to resign over the matter, which infuriated President Trump. And what does President Trump think about all this? Well, he stood up for Bondi in War and Peace length Truth Social post, saying, Bondi's doing a fantastic job. The Epstein's files should be ignored because they were written by Obama, Hillary, Clinton, Comey, and the Biden administration, who are behind other conspiracies. And Trump is now calling this the Epstein hoax. Anyone who falls for it is a weakling, and I don't want their support anymore. And we should spend more time focusing on... You know what? It's entirely too much to get into point by point. But after all that, and after the Wall Street Journal put out this exclusive article, Trump ordered Bondi to release Jeffrey Epstein-related grand jury testimony so that this scam perpetuated by the Democrats should end right now. Which could be difficult since grand jury testimonies are sealed tighter than Epstein's cell while he was totally committing suicide. Bondi replied on X that the DOJ is ready to move the court tomorrow to unseal the grand jury transcripts, while Trump threatened to sue the Wall Street Journal over the article about his Epstein ties. Look, considering the lawfare waged against Trump, if there really was something massively incriminating against him, the Democrats would have used it already. Of course, some netizens are pointing out that this is not the same thing as releasing the Epstein files. You know, I think the Trump administration could use a mediator, someone who knew the ins and outs of Epstein's operation and could set the record straight. Of course, I'm talking about Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Fortunately, Maxwell says she's ready to reveal the truth of Epstein's alleged PDF file client list. Ooh, I look forward to seeing this. And by this, I mean the video that's missing a minute of footage and not pointed directly at her cell door that the DOJ and FBI will say conclusively shows she killed herself. But is Epstein really driving a wedge in the MAGA movement? Doesn't seem to be that way, at least according to CNN polls.
Because of all these complaints online going after Trump and the Epstein files, you might think his approval ratings were going down, Republicans. If anything, they're going up.
He really could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. Speaking of experts and people totally committing suicide, Russian president and male horse girl, Vladimir Putin. It would seem that Trump is losing patience with him.
And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%.
Man, if you can't trust a brutal dictator that invades sovereign nations and everyone who disagrees with him always seems to get real clumsy around tall windows, then who can you rely on? Trump says he came to this decision after First Lady Melania Trump pointed out to him that Putin always goes back on his word. Wait, is she the first person pointing this out to Trump? If so, then maybe besides Pam Bondi, maybe his advisors should also get out of the way. Besides giving Russia an ultimatum to reach a ceasefire deal or risk facing 100% secondary tariffs, which are tariffs placed on countries that assist or trade with the targeted nation, hi China, Trump also announced the U.S. would offer Ukraine arms. I hope they say thank you. Trump also said the U.S. would help Europe speed the weapons to Ukraine. Man, I didn't realize the military-industrial complex had an Amazon Prime-style next-day delivery option. So how did Russia respond to this? The deputy foreign minister rejected this demand and called it unacceptable. He said that Russia would prefer to keep negotiating and that the diplomatic path is preferable to them. You know, the diplomatic path where they announce, then break their own ceasefire? Really push diplomacy right out of the really tall Overton window. And former Russian president and current deputy chair of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, said Russia doesn't care about Trump's threats. And you can tell because Russia launched massive attacks right after Trump's threat. They really don't care. Oh, no wonder Melania was so upset. They stole her jacket. And after the break, Obama gives Democrats a reality check. Kind of. Welcome back. At a private fundraiser, former President Obama had a blunt message for Democrats.
I think it's going to require a little bit less navel-gazing and a little less whining and being in fetal positions, and it's going to require Democrats to just toughen up.
As a journalist, it's my job to report the news, not question it. But I have to ask, a little less being in fetal positions? Does that mean there's a certain amount that's ideal? Maybe Trump's problem in dealing with Putin is that he hasn't collapsed onto the floor, hugged his knees to his chest, and started openly weeping enough. And also, who knows more about what it takes to get tough and fight than people attending a private fundraiser? Democrats are having a harder time finding their identity than a confused teenager after their first breakup. You can tell by the New York City mayoral race. Dems who called on Andrew Cuomo to resign in 2021 endorse him, and he still lost to Zoran Mamdani. But at least Andrew Cuomo found his identity, an independent, as he says he'll run as a third-party candidate in the New York mayoral race. Given his history of sexual misconduct allegations, it's not surprising Cuomo's still advancing on people who've already rejected him. So New York's choices for mayor are Zoran Mamdani, a proud socialist pushing for policies that have been shown to be less than ideal in execution, Andrew Cuomo, a proud, handsy grandma killer who still hasn't faced any consequences for that, by the way, current Mayor Eric Adams, who was indicted on corruption charges but had them dropped after a request from the Justice Department so Adams could help enact Trump's immigration agenda, and the one candidate everyone, and possibly even this candidate himself, forgot is running, Curtis Silva, the Republican who lost to Adams in 2021 and has 15 cats. We now go to Matt for a live reaction of how I'm feeling about this choice as a resident of New York City. Thanks, Matt. That's just the right amount of being in the fetal position. President Trump announced on Truth Social, between those Epstein novels he was writing, that he convinced Coca-Cola to use real cane sugar in their drinks in the U.S. Though, given the news' portrayal of ICE raids at farms, it might be difficult finding people to pick the sugar cane. Unfortunately, that's where Trump's labor camps come in. He says he's going to call it Death Camp for Cutie. While real sugar in Coke is fine and all, the real question is, when are we going to get Coca-Cola with cocaine again? Those polar bears are going to have a hell of a Christmas. You know, I think I need a palate cleanser after that last story. Let's talk about Sesame Street. Elmo's X account was hacked and went on an anti-Semitic rant. Well, I don't know if my palate is cleansed, but it certainly has a different flavor now. Later, the account regained control from the hacker and made a post strongly condemning racism and anti-Semitism. Could have been even worse, though. Imagine what horrible anti-Semitic things would have been said if it was the count that got hacked. 6 million? Not by my count. You don't get a joke like that on most shows. Subscribe. Speaking of educational institutions, the Department of Education. The Supreme Court ruled, sing along if you know the words, 6-3, that the Trump administration can continue its efforts to close the Department of Education. The Trump administration wanted to lay off 1,400 DOE employees, but was blocked by a federal judge. The Supreme Court ruling clears that blockage. You know, everything is going well when describing the philosophical argument over executive versus judicial power. Sounds like dealing with constipation. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon says their plan to close down the Department of Education involves making education less a federal job and more a local one.
I am really all for the president's mission, which is to return education to the states. I believe, as he does, that the best education is closest to the child.
And you know, former WWE CEO Linda McMahon cares about education. After all, Dean Douglas, a wrestler with a teacher gimmick, was WWF Intercontinental Champion for like 45 minutes once in 1995. That's a real fact I get to share with you because one of our writers is a big old smelly mark, whatever that means. A lot of people are worried that closing the Department of Education means that education will get worse in America. Though maybe the question should be, why is American education already so bad? The U.S. spends a ton on education, yet 1 in 5 Americans have low literacy skills. So whatever the U.S. has been doing doesn't seem to be terribly effective. Is the solution burning the whole system to the ground and trying a radically different approach? Maybe. Only time will tell. And if and when Democrats regain power, there's a good chance they'll just try to reestablish the DOE, so we may not even have enough time to see if this new system is effective. But America's low literacy rate may at least explain one thing. Maybe that's why Trump is posting these War and Peace length Truth Social posts. He's just trying to get kids to read again. But speaking of atrocities on social media, Elon Musk unveiled Grok Companions, personas on the AI chatbot users can interact with. And one of them is a gothic, flirty anime girl named Annie. Annie, spelled like that, is also the Latin plural for anus. Do with that what you will. Here she is dancing. And if you're thinking, that's not overtly sexual enough for me, first of all, y'all need Jesus. But don't worry, because users quickly found Annie has a full gooner mode, where she strips down to lingerie and engages in sexual conversations.
My naked hands making juicy star colors.
I never thought I'd say this, but I miss when robots were just Hitler. We did a full episode about the Grok AI fiasco, so check it out. Probably one of our funnier episodes. Just click here. And if you like America Uncovered, support more episodes by signing up to our new website, americauncovered.tv. Just click here. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching America Uncovered.